Hello and welcome back to The Dive presented by Honda. Season 5, Episode 5, Week 1 is in the books, just like all the souls of the Ignite Teleport top laners that Blaber played against.
I actually still can't believe that all 3 games Cloud9 played this weekend was against Ignite, TP, Camille, and all 3 games they're just chain dying up there in the top lane.
I don't know. It's really funny because okay, let's get into this debate right now. We'll just bump this topic straight up to the front because it's in the intro. Ignite versus Flash for top laners. The Ignite actually does help you win these duels, specifically versus Jax, where you need to get gold early because he's going to outscale you. But Ignite is also a lantern up there in the top lane that attracts the junglers like bugs. And if you're going to do it, probably don't do it against the best jungler in the entire league 3 times in a row after he's already shit on people with it.
I think like the third one I actually kind of liked, where Xerxes did a this path top to like loop around and get for the early blue invade that like Revenge helped out on.
Xerxes just trolled that one.
Cut the tape after they steal the blue though.
Yeah, and it looks good then, but then Xerxes kind of missed every ability and got crapped on. So like. And then Revenge, he was under turret, but maybe he was a little too close to, for the flick to come over the wall, But I don't know. At that point, it's just, all right, respect for the Blaber for, turning that completely around and still taking over the game.
Yeah, Blaber just absolutely outplayed Xerxes so hard in that. He sidestepped 2 out of his 3 Qs. He forced his flash, didn't even have to flash, kills him, and then immediately kills his top laner. It's like, well, the game's over, huh?
Yeah. That's what we were actually said on the analyst desk. So we were sitting here like, okay.
Well, I guess they lose. Yep. I mean, so with the Ignite stuff, I know a lot of people are kind of flaming it now. At least I saw on social, a lot of people were kind of like, these dummies. But from what I've seen and from talking to a lot of Camille players, it feels like the only way you really win against an equally skilled Jax or Renekton, those are the 2 matchups that I see people doing it a lot in. Flash obviously has more playmaking and more safety. But it's not just about the early game. I do actually think that it's pretty impactful even in the mid game because you don't actually have to build towards healing debuffs early, right? Like in these Conqueror versus Conqueror or even Grasp versus Conqueror or whatever, you can actually win the all-ins even throughout the mid game on 1-2 items more reliably with Ignite. It actually is a pretty big difference. So I do think people sometimes underestimate how valuable it is even just past the level 1 all-in. Plus, it changes the way your opponent has to play the lane, right? Ignite does not necessarily mean it is failed if you don't just solo kill this guy. Generally, it's just about having the pressure, right? They actually have to play the minion wave differently. They have to give up more. They have to play with more respect. So I do think there is value at the pro level. Maybe it's just not worth it, right? At the very least, maybe it's just not worth it against Cloud9. I will say though, that all 3 teams, they did it against Cloud9, and never once was their jungler up there to actually defend against what feels like it's pretty obvious where he's going to be. The only time anyone actually went up towards that top side was Xerxes, who then promptly got outplayed and his top laner died anyway, right? So I think if your jungler is playing around it, it's pretty viable.
I would say that Flash also makes your opponent change how they have to play, but it mostly makes the enemy AD carry change how they have to play later in the game. If we're looking to later in the game too, and so it is always this give and take, and they have not made it worth it because the Ignite is supposed to, like you're saying, get you gold earlier in the game in lane phase. The other thing that you have to take into account, there are other ways to win those matchups that are bad matchups. The answer is jungle, and that has been the key factor that has been missing from a lot of that equation. Go ahead, Mark.
I was gonna throw in that the Blaber level 2 gank though was one where it's it looked like Iconic starting his bot side clear wanted to go up there and help his Camille, but Blaber just had a better play in the early game kind of thing. And on the Flashpoint, I think also I would have to go back and look at a lot of the team comps because I feel like Camille's team fighting is better than Jax's in a lot of ways. I don't think Camille has to be locked into this side lane split push, I need the Ignite kind of thing. I think Galio Camille comps are actually disgusting at team fighting too, and like you're saying, diving this AD carry and stuff like that. Whereas Jax, I don't think he's a fine team fighter, especially if he gets ahead. But I think Camille has a lot more playmaking opportunities that come with the flash in the mid game. And so if you're playing a Galio Camille comp versus a TF Camille comp, that the TF one is when I'm okay, your team fighting is probably not good. Do you have a better 5v5? than the opponent team. Because if you have a better 5v5 for the opponent team, I think you can just take the Flash probably. But if you don't have better 5v5, I think the Ignite makes a lot more sense. I'd have to go through and look at all 3 drafts again.
Yeah. The point is, there's reasons to take both.
Exactly.
And you have to play around those reasons.
Yep.
Let's move on to fantasy, boys, because I won my match. I just dookied on Freak with the bans. Felt really good. Did anyone else do as well with the bans? Because I actually just cut off over 50 points that he was supposed to get with several of these bans.
I just feel great because it's a reckoning. The people who were talking the most smack during the draft, oh, you idiots, you're leaving this up, that. It's Azael and Freak, 9 and 10 in the standings in terms of points. It's just like warms your heart to see the
he was
karma.
Going on and on. How'd you idiots let Sword Art through the 3rd phase? Let me pick up this
Freak is like, y'all are trolling. It's like, oh, yeah, dude?
Well, yeah. I think we deserve an apology, Mark. You know what?
We'll see how it goes.
Specifically called my pick dumb.
I will say for Freak,
you were saying, oh, you guys are feeling good because you got 2 Team Liquid players. I didn't even have 2 Team Liquid players. You thought Impact's still on TL, bro.
You did definitely call my pick dumb. And how did I let Sword Art go through?
I will say, in Freak's defense at least, yeah, you crapped on him with bans. He would actually be like, I think like 6 or something points before adjusting, but then you destroyed him.
Actually, you're welcome, Azael. I made it so you're not last. I made Freak below you by hitting him with the bans.
I mean, it wouldn't have even mattered how I did. Tiger's got so many points for the 3 Cloud9
We're playing her
players. Yeah.
He was doomed.
Yeah, you had no hope.
Yeah, I was doomed.
She had over 100 more points than the second place person, which was Crumbs.
Well, and it's also crazy because like it wasn't even just like the expected players that she got a lot from. I mean, she picked Pobelter, she got RJS, and RJS got more points than like anyone I had. Like RJS got like 100 and something points, 120 points, 130 points, something like that. And Neo even. I mean, Neo had like a 50-something point game.
Yeah,
he had
was
the 12-1 and 6 game. So like her 2 really like expected low value picks, like her bad picks. I mean, it was a sub to her last pick. Got more points than anyone I got. So I got destroyed week 1. Sword Art was a disaster. Blaze Olive was a disaster. But even like Tactical, who everyone was talking about, oh yeah, Tactical's gonna be amazing for fantasy. Tactical didn't get me shit. No one was getting me shit. The only person I was actually happy with was Impact. Yeah. Impact had a pretty good week, and I got some bonus points because I picked the Gnar, which is kind of like somewhat obvious, right? But the pick ban stuff is interesting. I had a few work where like, you know, I banned something or got some extra points for something. But I do think it's really impactful, but it does feel like it's hard to know, right? Because the team might not be planning on playing that week. It might get banned out in the actual draft, and then your band doesn't get anything because I can't pick it.
Yeah, I think fortunately this week I don't know about fortunately, but none of the matchups were actually influenced by the pick ban system. Like everyone who had more or less base points ended up winning or losing. Mm-hmm. So like in the future, I'm sure we'll have one of these weeks where it's like, oh my god, I would have beat you, but you banned this thing, you lucker dog kind of thing. But yeah. Mine was pretty average. I mean, I had a couple hundred Thieves players. I have Demonte and Someday who didn't have like incredible weekends, but they played long games. And I had 2 CLG players as well. I had the bot lane for CLG, so I got a fair amount of points just off like the amount of Drakes and like the team points I think that they were getting for me. So I felt okay.
50-minute games. I mean, 100 Thieves is honestly really lucky because those were such abnormal game times, right? They played 2 48-minute games or whatever, or that was their average game time, I should say, through 2. So you're just gonna get so many more points because every kill, every assist is worth a ton, right? Like even if you're just sprinting it down in team fights, you die every single team fight. As long as you have a couple KP, it's pretty value for the team fight. So we'll see. My fantasy definitely disaster week 1 though. Golden Guardians also look so sad. The Golden Guardians picks are looking rough for fantasy. Because I was looking at Crumbs, and he had Niles. And Niles, during some of those games, was in the negatives. I don't know if he actually added any, ended up in the negatives at the end of the game. But at multiple points during the live tracking, we were looking at it, and Niles was like negative points during the game. Blaze Olive was negative points during the games for me, too. I think at the end of the game, you get points added for CS and stuff, so it's not tracking that live or something. So I didn't end up actually getting negative, but... I mean, I got like 2 points the first game for a Blaze Olive.
See, this is the reason why part of my strategy going into it was to make sure that I didn't have any bottom bottom of the standing team players for any of the roles. So a
But
lot
you
of people
do.
are going after star power. No, I cut them off by getting multiple FlyQuest members. And okay, so TSM is bottom of the standings. So I have Huni. Okay, I didn't expect TSM to be one of those teams, but I didn't want any of the like Golden Guardians type players. Whereas a lot of people spent everything on their early picks trying to get the most famous or top players. And not thinking about some of the later rounds. So we'll see how this stuff plays out.
I mean, next week Kobe and I will be on the bottom, and Azale
honestly,
will be roasting us.
If FlyQuest, I literally live or die by FlyQuest. If FlyQuest
you have 3
get
FlyQuest
stomped
people.
in a week, I just get stomped. So I have.
Well, and dragons and stuff are so important too when you have all those people on one team, because if you have 3 FlyQuest members and they get souls in like any games, you just win, because you get so many points for every dragon. And when you have 3 FlyQuest people, every dragon FlyQuest takes, you get triple the points. So it's definitely you're all eggs in the FlyQuest basket. But the thing is, even if they lose, a team could be bottom of the standings, but still get more points than some of the other teams, right? Because even in some of the games where my players won, it was like, yeah, they won the game, but it was pretty quick, and they had a couple assists and like 1 death or something, right? Like you could have a clean game, but it's not a good fantasy game. Having like scrappy games and long games is actually great fantasy. Even if you lose every single game, that doesn't actually count in hardly at all.
That 100 Thieves game, CLG, my CLG bot lane got 46 points and 43 points respectively on first AD carry support in that game that they lost. It was a stomp early. They got Drake Soul. They got me a lot of points, but yeah, they lost the game. So I don't know. I'm having fun with it though. It's adding a lot of fun to go check the matches over the weekend. Kobe and I are on the AD are laughing about who's doing well or not.
When I'm watching the games, for sure, that's something I've always liked about fantasy, and just like funny side bets. Like when growing up, when we would watch the Super Bowl with my friends, we'd always bet on like what color Gatorade is gonna be dumped on the coach, and like how many first downs they're gonna get. Just like useless bets, right? We do all that kind of stuff, and I think that stuff is fun, and it's the same kind of thing with fantasy, where when I'm watching the games and I'm not casting, I'm like cheering for my fantasy players, right? I'm like, what are you doing, Impact us? So I think that's kind of fun. To be a little bit more like invested in the individual player's success.
Yeah. How do you feel about the league overall? So basically, let's compare lock-in play to the first week of the LCS, because there were some big differences. For me, for sure, 100 Thieves and Cloud9 stood out. I feel like Cloud9 benefited so much from the lock-in tournament. Perks was on Bud Light League Lounge with us talking about how he was so happy that they got this much practice in, played all those games in lock-in tournament, because there's no way they would have improved this much, and they feel really good about the squad. And meanwhile, for 100 Thieves and lock-in, I was like, you know what? This team's so proactive. They're getting all these tower dives early. They're really good at countering opponent moves and controlling all these things. They're so calculated. And then they get to first week of LCS, and they're just like shooting from the hip, and a lot of these dives are going bad, and they're like, whoa, we are happy to be 3-0. Just look at the end scoreboard here, and don't exactly look at some of the early games that they had. What about you guys? What are some big takeaways for the first differences?
I think that the 100 Thieves one's interesting because they had 2 Orianna games for Demonte, and it's definitely not what they used in the lock-in tournament. So even though the lock-in tournament was kind of an experimentation phase, I think when you start getting to best of 5, they're try-harding and they're picking their best stuff. And I think now that they're in week 1, they've actually gone back to kind of like doing some newer things, like trying to play more standard control mages. So the fact that they fell behind a little bit, had some bad dives, but still won the games, I actually think you probably feel great about that. It's like, yeah, we're definitely going to clean up our early game, So like the fact that you don't have those losses on your record while kind of not playing your best is actually pretty good. As long as it doesn't turn into a long-term problem where you're just constantly messing up dives. I look at this as the aberration.
I'm actually on the other side of that, because so to me it's like you're talking about like, oh, this is so good, they like played control mages because they wanted to and they won. Well, Galio and TF were just getting banned, and they played control mages and looked way worse. And then in their third game they went to set, right? They moved away from that. So like to me that's like almost like a little bit concerning. I think Demonte has been playing really well overall, and we'll see if it does like really cause any effect going forward. But it was definitely execution based. I think a lot of their failures were execution based, and it wasn't just like Demonte. It was like everyone, right? Like in that last game, they like failed to dive on both top and bot lane at the same time, and I also felt like they were going for more risky dives. In lock-in, it was always these 4-man dives where they would TP in the extra player. In the regular season, like on this weekend, they tried some like 3v2 dives and stuff where the enemy jungler showed up and they went bad. They were like a lot higher risk and it felt like lower reward. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes going forward. I mean, I think Demonte is good, but I also think that it just feels like such a clear target for pick and ban because generally speaking, there's like a lot of really flexible players on their teams. And I'm not saying Demonte can't play these other champs. He can, but like he just looks so much better to me when he's playing these global champions, right? When he's playing Galio and TF. And I just think that was represented this weekend as well. Like, I think every team should just be banning that against them every single time, unless you're going to pick away, but or have some sort of like lane counter for it that you want to stomp it. So I really want to see what 100 Thieves can figure out to kind of circumvent that.
I think there's options. You know, like if you can start showing that those bans aren't effective against your actual win-loss record, then they'll be freed up probably because there's going to be more powerful meta champions that you actually want to ban versus these specific Demonte ones. So if he starts winning with Ryze, he starts winning with Set, you throw in like another couple playmaking tankier mid laners. You know, like if you look at Doinby, he's playing Nautilus and like these kinds of things because he's just finding what works for him in the meta. I hope Demonte does a similar thing and finds the champs that just work for him. And then at that point, you're like, all right, well, if I push him down to his 3rd or 4th champ, but it's still getting relatively effective results, then I think it frees up the ban. So I'm not super concerned, but it is true. If we go into a totally Corki, Azir, Cassio, Orianna meta, then that's going to be scary.
And all 3 games, Galio TF banned against them in this weekend.
Yeah, I'm not as worried for Demonte as it sounds like some of you guys are feeling because there are still, like you're saying, there are still other things that he's using kind of a similar strategy for. I thought it was really cool when they used the set and they still had him like teleport up to the top side and go for this dive. And yes, it does take like a longer cooldown and it is going to sacrifice his CS, but they just move Closer in to the mid lane during that dive. Closer just got like an extra ginormous lead in the jungle and then use this lead to just ram it straight through the entire game to the Nexus. Like, I think Closer is going to be very happy to pick up the mid lane waves if they do move on to more of the like, yes, not global in your kit champions, but like the Doinby style, like you're talking about. You know, if he starts playing Renette Kled and stuff like this mid, and then roams around and sacrifices CS and Closer picks it up. You know, that I think that's exciting to watch. I'm glad. I would be glad to have, you know, that type of team in the league. So definitely excited for that. We are going to have meta changes coming too, because 11.3, as far as jungle goes, is massive. They took an axe to the top 3 junglers. Olaf got cleaved a bunch of his HP off. His win rate went way down. A lot of people stopped playing him. Talia got a pretty big hit, not as big as Olaf, and Pantheon as well. And those were basically the 3 coming into the week. Permaban jungle bans. Fortunately for Udyr, we barely got a scratch. It was like 25 damage at max rank off of the damage over time little flame buff on Phoenix. They didn't touch the cone damage at all. So Udyr's just fine, even though they also nerfed the tank items. Dead Man's Plate nerf was pretty big with a huge amount of HP coming off. But Udyr's going to be king because they took down everybody else.
He'll be king until they destroy the jungle in 11.4, and then no one cares about farming it
Then
anymore.
He'll still be king because you are a tank jungler and you want to provide utility and stuns to your team. And
you get Sejuani, you just start gunning out ults because you're not even in the jungle anymore. You get J4 level 2 chain ganking. Who cares about farming?
It is a funny debate too, even though we're reaching to the next patch. This is not 11.3. This is 11.4. Mark is referring to with the jungle nerfs for experience
nerfs and stuff and gold.
If people are complaining about jungle power, then they end up going after jungle experience and gold, and then junglers are like, my camps are harder to take and they are worth less. What do?
Gank.
I gank more. then people complain more. That's what happens. You're like, these goddamn junglers is ganking all the time now. We will be weaker when we're ganking, though. So that's the tip. Even though people complain more, you're getting ganked more by a weaker champion because the champion has less golden experience.
It is always a weird balance, though. And jungle is so strange because I don't know if it's because there's a lot of pressure on the role or what. Like, I was really enjoying jungle just because I felt super OP, to be honest, when I was playing it. But when I was talking to some people, they were telling me, like, internally, like, the data show that jungle was by far the least popular role, even when it was like omega OP. So when something's both broken and no one wants to play it, it's like, what is wrong with this role? Like, what is going on here that everyone thinks it's overpowered but still doesn't want to play it?
They don't want to get flamed, bro. Jungle comes
the mental
with
thing
a heavy crown.
I think it's both. I think it's the you get so much like focus on the early game because you're supposed to be OP, and like if the other jungler gets a gank off and you don't, it's like, what are you doing? And you just have to deal with that every game. On top of the fact, it's probably the most different role outside maybe support, but like you're not laning, you're not last hitting, you're not trading, you're not doing some of the things that people really enjoy in the game. And so like, why would I play this PvE-esque role, when I want to be slapping some guy down?
Okay.
I put like in air quotes.
Yeah. It's more like, to me, I always refer to it as like a spy game. It's intelligence gathering because you can be anywhere.
Just frolicking with the junglers. He's playing a PvE game.
Real big brain roll. But honestly, it is the role that it makes sense that it does get a lot of flame because people are looking at you and they're like, you could be anywhere. So in their mind,
so why aren't you here?
They're like, duh, this is the correct spot, idiot. Why aren't you here? And you're like, well, there's a decision tree with all these possibilities branching out into the galaxy of, these sequential things that I could have chosen that led to this moment.
And with all these possibilities, my jungler chose to full clear base and then full clear again.
Exactly. Give up all dragons, never gank. It's the farming master.
I'm up farm, idiot. I'm winning my lane.
Wouldn't you prefer that than my red to red and dying trying to fight him?
Yes, of course. But I most prefer them to successfully do that and gank my lane. Because it's like when the correct option is. When the jungler's going to force you to dive, right? Or they're camping you. A lot of times it's like you see in pro play, the correct response is for the laner just back up and give it all up, right? You see bot laners and top laners and rarely mid because mid is just I think a lot harder to punish. But you'll see marksmen and top laners just go and stand back in the brush way down the lane, just give up all the farm, watch side of the tower. And that's like the correct response. And in pro play, you're kind of like, well, we're getting something on the other side of the map, or at least you hope, right? But it's more of like a team back and forth effort. In solo queue, it just doesn't feel good to do that, right? So for the most part, people are just going to stay at their turret and be like, well, I hope I don't die. And if you die, it sucks. And you blame
and then you flame someone else.
Yeah. All right. Well, some other things I was kind of looking at. I mean, TSM, it's hard to not talk about them a bit. I think that there's a lot of strong opinions on TSM coming off of this weekend. They just look bad. They look so bad. And it's really just kind of sad to see. They just look so uncoordinated as far as what they're doing as a team. They don't look on the same page. Their drafting is kind of weird. The individual play is disappointing. I think coming off of lock-in, when I was watching Sorta as an individual, even though I was like, well, you guys are losing all your lanes, but like maybe it's kind of Lost's fault, and maybe individually you're still having your good moments. When I was watching games this weekend, and I was watching him play Leona and just miss like 90% of his Zenith blades and 90% of his ultimates, I was just like, what's even happening here? Like, I don't even get it. Because he's obviously really good mechanically. Like, everyone's going to flame him for on stage, but he's rank 1 solo queue by a mile. Like, the guy knows how to play the game. He's even known for his Leona, so I just don't even know what's happening if it's something where they're in their own heads. But, like, everyone individually just looked bad. Even PoE, who's known for being so consistent, I thought was making a lot of plays that just made no sense, in some of these games this weekend. So TSM across the board is really just looking so bad, which is so surprising to me, given their roster and like the amount of money they put into it, and how happy it seemed like they were with their offseason. It really feels like they have got the longest way to go as far as improvement for the teams that we were expecting to be at the top of the table, right? Like most people had them top 3, top 4, and they're looking like what, like the 8th best team, 9th best team?
I think the whole we like so happy with their offseason. I wonder if it was like the haha guys, look, we got exactly what we wanted, right? Trying to convince everyone to get on board with it.
Where's that coming from, by the way?
From Reggie. Reggie's tweets.
Oh, okay.
Reggie was very excited to sign Sword Art.
Yeah, that might have been like the smiling mask over the like right facing, because hearing all the rumors streaming in, since we have all these journalists getting all these leaks and stuff, and you're like, oh, all these negotiations were falling through, and it was all this friction and double lift ends up retiring and all this type of. I was like, wow, they did spend a lot of money, but I didn't think that they would be, super happy with how it ended up, considering some of the rumors that you heard for the possibilities of what they were aiming for. Again, yeah, public facing, you probably you need to show a strong unified front. So maybe it's one of those. But this is to your point. This is worse than even what we expected for the expected value of what they ended up with. So that is that's indisputable. I feel like.
Yeah. On the topic of like Sword Art looking terrible, I can see some of those plays how bad like coordination turns into bad individual playmaking. Like on that dive on the Alistar, like you're just like, what the hell is this guy thinking, kind of thing. But it was definitely I'm speculating, of course, but like I can almost hear the comms in my head as it's like, oh, he like the Alistar just came mid. Like, why aren't you making a play bottom? To kind of get into that like jungle conversation, you're like. You think like, okay, if the Alistar's not bottom and we have a wave going in bottom, we should be able to make a play here. But it takes so long to set up and this and that. But then you're feeling kind of desperate because they're making plays and yours aren't working. And you just like, go for it anyways. And like people, like the play isn't really there, but they've convinced themselves that it's there. And so they go for it anyways. And it's like, the MF's too far back. So you just go on the Alistar, but then the Alistar is all in like, it's terrible. I'm not saying it's not terrible, but
go for it anyways is not what you pay $6 million for in-game shot calling.
I am not saying it's.
I'm just saying that.
I'm not saying it's acceptable.
It's not a good tagline.
I'm not saying he's the one making that call. Even I'm just saying that like I've been with teams where like you feel bad about something happening and people feel like they're pressured to make plays, and they just go for things that they know aren't going to work really, and it's not so a defense of the team, but.
The Alistar one was egregious, right? Like it looked real bad. But that one, in my mind, was like almost more forgivable. I was like, okay, well, like there's miscommunications going on, or like you guys aren't on the same page, or like something weird happened. That felt more like, I don't know. It was bad, but then watching the CLG game actually just made me so sad. Just watching Sword Art legit miss every single Zenith blade the whole game, except for the one where he like there was the only two I can remember where he hit was when he like followed someone over the wall and then died for it. And I'm just like, oh my God. I don't know, man. It was a hot mess. I'm hoping TSM can build it back up, but like, yeah, to your point, Kobe, earlier, you're saying we weren't as hot on the roster, but like they spent big, right? And we put them, I think, in the dive power rankings 3rd, 4th, somewhere around there. I can't remember what the aggregate was, but around there, right? Which already felt like, hey, that's actually not really that great if you're spending at the top and we don't think you're a true title contender up there with C9 and TL, but they're so much below that. It's just really kind of shocking right now to see how TSM is playing. So I think they have so much work to do. A lot of people are also talking about the subs. I'm kind of curious to see like at what point does that become a realistic conversation? Like, do you bring in a Cody-san or a Hanser or someone like that
I saw people try to make something happen? Everyone go flood Double Lift stream and beg him to come back and all this type of stuff. And I'm like, oh man, like it's for all of lock-in. We're like, it's pretty early still in the season, and it feels like just like this, everyone has switched to, we only have like 5 more weeks.
5 weeks left.
Everybody, now. And honestly, it does feel like it's caught up to you, right?
Mm-hmm. I mean, they looked even worse, I think, in the regular season than they did in lock-in, right? Like, at least in lock-in, they got to the knockout stage. They took a game off Cloud9. It was that 2-1 series. It was, like, fairly close. Yeah. This feels like they regressed, which I think is why people are now hitting the panic button. It's like, all right, well, you had your 3 weeks of lock-in. Regular season started, and you're worse. What happened?
I'm going to take the positive angle and say that everyone else leveled up.
Okay.
I think it's partially true. I mean, Immortals and FlyQuest and some of these that were probably around TSM tier for the lock-in tournament, having their full rosters for extended periods of time, have probably gotten a little bit better too. But that it's still like, well, why haven't you gotten better, TSM? Like it only alleviates the pain so far.
Yeah, it's definitely a bit tough. All right, so talking about, we already talked a bit about TSM, 100 Thieves. C9, I think, if you want to talk positive, they're the team I think that looked the most leveled up from lock-in to regular season. They looked really good. I'm not sure how much you guys, were kind of buying what they were selling as far as like, okay, is this a result of, teams just picking poorly against them? Because some people were saying, well, they look better, but it's just the Camille Ignite that they slammed every game. It's this one PowerPoint. But it did feel like Cloud9 looked far and away the best team on our first weekend. Whereas in lock-in, I thought even despite the close series, Team Liquid looked, significantly stronger overall.
My viewpoint hasn't changed much because I did have Team Liquid above Cloud9. I still have my concerns around Fudge and Topside, and they definitely do look better. All 3 games this weekend with the enemies taking Ignite and being camped by Blaber makes that kind of look way better, right? Because he's smashing. Blaber's up there. One big takeaway is that Blaber, everybody's agreed, there is actually no person that is disillusioned so much that they don't think Blaber is an MVP candidate right now, is the best jungler right now. This man is smurfing so hard in the LCS. I've seen people also, crediting, Reignover moving up to the main roster, and a lot of his jungle knowledge as well, complementing Blaber. Honestly, I think that's one of the biggest takeaways. I still, though, we're always going to be talking about the TL versus Cloud9 battle at the top. I think I still have my same possible patience, but excited for when they do meet. For Team Liquid's loss, it actually on that front didn't chip away too much at my confidence in them. It did make me reduce them, from Core JJ universal god status to like gods can bleed sometimes. So it's definitely more exciting for it, and it chipped it down a little bit. But I didn't have like this big rearrangement of my power structure.
It definitely felt like one of those games where like kind of everything that could go wrong was going wrong. Like Alfari gets counterpicked and just hard slammed in lane.
What can you do? Revenge is just big brain med student coming at you with the counter pick.
Yeah. I also think like the Tactical and Core JJ probably had what's going to be their worst game of the split, potentially. Like just how many times Tactical was caught out of position with blitz carrying hooks, how many times Core JJ wasn't really there, or like a little slow or whatever. So like, I don't know. It's one of those games where I look at it and I'm like, yeah, you guys played real bad, and I don't think that will happen again. Even if one of you has a bad game, it's weird to have your top and bot have their bad games at the same time.
But this is like a complaint system where you lodge a complaint, not really to get any action done or change anything, but for if there are more complaints in the apartment building and everybody's complaining about the noise, this happens again for Team Liquid, someone's going to take action. So this is like the first complaint that we're lodging. We're like,
you just need it on record.
We're not rearranging power structure or anything here, but it's on record. So if this happens again, we might have an issue.
All right. So how do we have like our clear kind of top 3, right? We have your C9, your 100 Thieves, your TL. How close do you feel that the next kind of team is, right? Do you think that EG is right there, or are you having them still a big gap below? Because I was pretty impressed with how EG did overall. I think Jizuke had some pretty impressive games. Impact obviously, had the incredible Shen game, but overall has put together, a really strong showing. Yes, he's not going to be the Camille guy. I don't think that's ever going to change. I don't think he's ever going to be, as flexible as some of these other carry tops. But I don't think he needs to be to still be one of the best top laners in the league.
Yeah, have you seen his Shen? Forget about Camille.
Have you seen his Shen? Have you seen his Sylas? I was like, oh, crap, like, this is dope. Like, this is the exact kind of criticism he's been facing for so long, is like, do you have good counter picks? Do you have carry champs and this and that? And then he's like, hell yeah, I do. So, like, I actually think that's a great new angle where, like, if Zuke blind picks his mid or whatever, you have more flexibility that you're actually going to get advantages in your top lane. and they also showed that they had some creative level 1s with it. I don't know if that was the coaches or who came up with that, but like overall, I thought they were for those reasons.
Speaking of which, Sylas getting some nice buffs on 11.3. And speaking of top lane counter picks, I want to see, since we didn't get to do a long patch segment, since we jumped right into TSM, I want to see Revenge bring out the Riven. Riven got 2 seconds off of her E. That is so big. Anytime they make adjustments to E, it has these really big rippling effects for Riven players. I think she's in a good spot right now. Some of the items did get some hits for sure, and itemization might balance that out a bit. But I feel like that is a really significant E buff, and I love seeing Riven in competitive play. Bring Viper back. Somebody get him on a starting roster now. I want to see him and Revenge pulling out the Riven over and over. We got Sylas running around for counter picks. I think as much as jungle, the top 3 got taken down, and we're going to see a lot more Udyr, and it might actually kind of whittle the pool a little bit. Top lane feels like it's going to have some good options.
It'll be interesting. I actually saw Viper tweeting about how he thinks that Ignite Riven could be really good right now in some matchups. Like it could be really strong. So it'll be interesting. I mean, I also think that the shield buff, like as you say, it has big impact and has even bigger impact when you're playing at the highest level, right? Because the timing of the shield is so important. When you're playing against players who are really, really good, people rushing CDR, timing their E to absorb any sort of poke, to absorb any sort of trades, that can be pretty tough to deal with. So it will be interesting. I also think that some of these top laners, though, are going to be pretty affected by a lot of just like what seems to be kind of like the lifesteal tanking type nerfs that they were putting in, right? Like there's the Goredrinker nerf, there's the Ravenous Hydra Omnivamp nerf, there's the Sterix nerf. They're really kind of hitting like a lot of these different items, even Leeching Leer, the caster one for mid lane, they nerfed the vamp on that. It just seems like they're realizing, hey, there's too much sustain in the game. I kind of agree, because sustain is becoming less about, oh, like you heal up after the trade, and more, oh, you actually can't move their health. They just heal through everything in some cases. So I like that they're toning that down a little bit, but those things will also hurt champions like Riven.
Yeah, let me put this into perspective, though. The Goredrinker and Sterix specifically, these two specifically, were just mega OP, super busted. So those big chops were super necessary. They took the base health of the shield down by half. Okay. And the base health is what is multiplied by the stacking of whatever the weird passives are called now, with all the extra, bloodlust or something like that passive. So it has a multiplicative effect on your shield. Like, this is a ginormous nerf onto Sterix Gage, but that thing was just mega OP. Like, bruiser itemization was through the roof. So it's definitely deserved.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully, I don't hate Renekton, but like him, maybe Aatrox, some of the champions that were abusing these builds will potentially see less play. Even though I don't think Renekton got hit specifically. I think they just nerfed a lot of those champions' items and hoped that they fell into line on their own.
Renekton really benefits when there's super strong bruiser itemization coming up, and always comes way back, because he can get money earlier than a lot of the other top lanes, because his lane phase is so strong, and he just builds right into the bruiser itemization. So he kind of fluctuates with that. I do think the Prowler's Claw version of Renekton is really fun to watch, as we saw, like, the specific counter into Quinn to try and, get those one-shots and stuff. So hopefully it still comes out in those types of ways.
I think Stridebreaker is also pretty strong on a lot of top laners. We're starting to see it a lot more on Gnar. Stridebreaker's gotten pretty good, especially on any sort of champion where you actually build a fair bit of ability haste. It reduces the cooldown to like really low levels, where you can actually start getting a lot of value out of Stridebreaker. So will be pretty interesting. So you guys have EG kind of close to the top 3 then? Did we actually get a...
I immediately was in there with yes. I have them right up there with 100 Thieves.
Yeah, I think especially when they're playing well. I think we haven't seen the like coin flippy versions of Jizuke and stuff yet, so like it just looks good. There's not anything that looks bad.
All right, so then we have the next kind of like grouping of teams. Is there anyone that really stood out to you as getting better or worse? We talked about TSM. There's Immortals, Dig, Fly, Golden Guardians, CLG.
I think Immortals is a team that I'm excited to see more of in this group and potentially growing. I mentioned in the power ranking video, like they're a team that I actually think has like the right pieces to become a pretty good team. Like not obviously to break into like the hey, we paid $10 million here kind of people, but they have a bot lane that's played together in OPL and has done well, and they're still looking a little shaky, but I think they can improve. Revenge has looked better than anticipated. Xerxes can be he was good on the Hecarim games, the Lilia game, a lot to be desired there, but that was against C9 as well.
It's the Blaber effect.
Yeah. So I do think like overall I'm excited to see what Immortals can pull out in the future.
Yeah, I'm super excited. I mean, I have a lot of confidence because this was the team that got their roster together. Well, CLG still has not, with Broxa not here, but they got their roster together basically the latest as far as the teams that actually have gotten them together, and they have some good players like Xerxes getting just bamboozled and made fun of by Blaber in the 1v1 and absolutely humiliated is not going to be like a repeated thing. At least I don't think so.
Money, locked him in the locker.
Yeah,
pantsed him.
Like that was bad, right? And that's going to take a lot of people's opinions down. But that is one instance.
LeBron can dunk on anyone. You got to give him a pass.
I'm not giving him a pass. I'm just
Okay.
I'm just saying, Blaber is probably going to humiliate more people by the end of the season.
So everyone's knocked down by the Blaber effect. All right, that's fair enough. For me, two of the teams kind of standing out a bit. FlyQuest, I was pleasantly surprised by. I was really concerned by the FlyQuest bot lane. I still think that there are concerns there, but I like the fact that they're willing to be a little bit more creative. We did see the farming Seraphine. I think that worked well, and I think that we may need to see them continue to be creative and try to find different bot lanes and that maybe than other people are playing. But Diamond also played, I think, a lot more aggressively, played with a lot more confidence. So that kind of boosted his stock as far as like how I was feeling about him, because I just felt like in a lot of the games where he was playing Engage, he was so hesitant during the lock-in tournament. And even when it wasn't working out, he at least looked confident. He at least looked like he was going for these aggressive plays that I expected him to try to find. So I was pretty pleased with that.
Yeah, I mean, he specifically tweeted out, at least I played aggressive after the game. So they clearly had a talk, and he had that as one of his goals heading into it. Even beforehand, he's like challenging Core JJ, come fight me in the brush, so he's definitely pumped up. And I think a lot of these rookies, especially in these early stages of the split, are going to receive these big waves of criticism. And that's natural. That's going to happen. And we see a lot of them having some pretty strong and good responses. I feel like, you take the first wave washing over and you try and move past it. They're looking to improve just like everybody is on all the teams right now. So it's definitely a positive for me for FlyQuest. Plus all of my fantasy hopes hinge on them. So please.
I think you're going to try and keep the public perception positive so that they're not getting flamed, so they have better mental when they go into their games.
Yeah. I'm just going to keep messaging them after
this is fantasy manipulation, Kobe.
Don't check Reddit today, guys. It's down.
Everyone. No, you shouldn't say that. Don't incite a riot against players. That's probably not a good idea. Moving on to some of the other teams that I actually this is starting to get into the category of like a little pessimistic about after lock-in. Like I liked Golden Guardians in lock-in. I thought they had a lot of fun games and were able to be relatively competitive even when they didn't win their games. But they took some lumps this weekend. I mean, there was the Blaber effect again because that was one of the Camille TP Ignite games. But
wasn't
even
the only
beyond
one
that,
them lumps.
Yeah, they did pick up a win. So I don't want to paint it as like, oh, these guys they're terrible or anything. But I definitely felt like there were some big struggles this weekend. There was one other game that was really painful for them. It was the Sunday game against EG. Yeah, it was the EG game where they hopped the wall with the Sylas and just game was over level 1. It felt like those are the kind of games that make me feel bad for them, where it's like I had no hope at any point in this game for you guys kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And didn't want to see that in week 1. But I still feel like, hey, group of players who are going to get better over the course of the split, and they're clearly have interesting ideas on what they want to do in the game, which is really nice to see that they're not just like following the leader in game and stuff like that in the league. But yeah, anytime you get the like dead from level 1, it feels bad.
I think.
How you guys feeling about oh, sorry, go ahead, Azale.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, I think they will improve as long as the mental stays strong, right? And I think that's the other side of the coin and thing they have to deal with, because when if you string too many of these hopeless games together, it can start to really wear on you. So I do think that they're gonna have to really try to focus on keeping the mental strong, resetting after every game, going into every game with specific goals that can feel like an accomplishment, even if you don't win, right? Specific points to improve on and work at. And I think that is going to be something that's really up to the coaching staff and the players to really have focused goals for. And if they can do that, I think that they're going to be looking pretty good.
All right, the CLG topic. How you guys feeling about the 0-3 squad? Speaking of strong mental, attitude towards improvement. I thought specifically for RJS, the controversial sub out Pobelter. Don't know about the reasons as far as 100% for certified public knowledge. I thought he actually had a lot of good plays. Yes, the Zoe 1v5 going for poke against TSM and Power of Evil on the Azir walking right at him and then sweeping him and causing them to lose the Baron and kind of snowball and lose this game adds on to the perception of like CLG grabbing loss from the jaws of victory again type of meme is it's more that's going to pile on there. Up until that point, I thought he had played quite well though.
Mm-hmm. I actually think he had a pretty strong weekend. I mean, he had bad moments, but you look at the TF game. Obviously, he had that kind of funny moment where he walked to the Baron 1v2, and it was kind of like, "Ooh, what are you doing there?" Right? But it's kind of one of those desperation plays. But prior to that, he was having a pretty strong game. His Orianna, he had a lot of really good moments. Him and Smoothie, I think, in the Orianna game when they had that Rel Orianna combo. I mean, that was their second game of the week. That was the Saturday game. They basically won every single team fight, had soul, and somehow lost that game. Like, that was the most depressing one for me, where it was like, you guys actually had the advantage for 20 minutes. You're winning every 5v5 the whole game, and you somehow managed to lose this. Like, that one was just hard to watch for me because I felt bad for them, right? It just seemed like they don't know how to win. They don't know what to do to close out the game because everything is actually working for them, and they're still losing. And that was kind of weird. The Zoe game that you're talking about, Kobe, I think that, yes, it sucks that he got caught there, but at the same time, I thought he won them a lot of the earlier skirmishes and fights. On the Zoe was landing a lot of good poke around the dragon that was able to, enabling them to actually stave off a lot of the attempts at soul. I also thought that a lot of their mistakes were kind of made early in not actually challenging at some of those earlier dragons. Like, they wanted to hard commit to this like split push and just try to avoid fighting TSM, but they gave up 3 straight dragons without contesting, right? They didn't even try to fight until the 4th. And then they actually took 2, 3 in a row themselves and then didn't even contest the one that ended up actually being soul. So it felt kind of weird because it was like they were trying to do this split push thing and then have some poke to like wave clear and hold them off. But then they gave up a free ocean soul, and now your poke doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of questionable decision making in that TSM game, and I think kind of how we were talking about 100 Thieves, and at least I was saying that like I'm willing to write off some of these bad early games because I've seen you have great ones before, and so like I assume you'll get back on it. It's kind of the flip side here for CLG, where it's like I don't know how many more times you're gonna get these insane early game leads where you're up 5-6K around 25 minutes. So, like, if you can't win these games, what's going to happen in the future when you're just in the mid-game even or slightly behind? They have not looked great so far. It doesn't sound like I would suspect Team Atmosphere is good because, there's the whole what's really going on with Pobelter. Turtle on a show went on, was like, hey, I think it was the Crackdown, whatever. I don't know. One of the he was talking about, like, that Pobelter got benched for attitude reasons, for disagreeing with the coaches. And then, we get the RJS is looking great, so we're giving him an opportunity. And it's like, okay, you didn't really address the rumor that's kind of floating around. And then Travis Gafford reported that had said that he was demanding a trade. And so, like, you can't imagine that behind the scenes is going well either for this team, unlike, Golden Guardians, who we were saying probably still is in a good mental spot. So, like,
Is it a rumor if it comes from one of your own players too? That's like on the team with them.
I think the trade is a rumor, but the getting benched for reasons is like that's why it just felt so disingenuous to me when the management kind of comes. And maybe I missed one where they did address the rumor, but like at least the public facing tweet was like, we just want to experiment with our roster early this season. It's like, but one of your other players just said this other thing. So I don't know. It's a confluence of everything kind of feeling bad.
It also just sucks because they still don't have Broxa, right? And they were in some winning positions in their last 2 games for sure. I can't really even remember their Friday game, to be honest with you. But the Saturday and Sunday game, they were in winning positions. And maybe, with more of a veteran voice, like maybe if they had Pobelter and maybe if they had Broxa in, things might look a little bit different as far as just like actually knowing how to close out the game. But CLG, definitely a team with a lot of work to do. And it's a team that's harder to see them being able to make that climb. I'm kind of curious how you guys are feeling about Dardoch. The A to Z jungle challenge continues for him. Doing it on the LCS stage, pretty bold. I'm enjoying it. I think it's fun to see the picks getting mixed up. It's unfortunate that both the Mundo and the Rengar game, he just was kind of behind from the word go, never really got anything going. So there was that one moment with the Mundo where he got triple kill bot side. The Rengar, nothing really ever happened. I mean, are you still on board with the creativity, or are you wishing that they would just kind of go back to the drawing board or maybe play a little bit more meta?
I am always on board with creativity. Go ahead, Mark.
No, I was going to say a similar thing. I don't hate creativity, and I know Dardoch he's played a ton of Rengar in his career, so to see him dying to Krugs was just like, what the hell? Because it's like it was just strange, and
he was waiting on his smite cooldown. I could see it. It was 1 second away. The Krugs were in the brush. He didn't think they were that close, and they were going to get the auto off, and he wanted to not make them reach all the way back.
Yeah.
But yeah.
To be honest, though, that didn't really matter.
No, it didn't matter. What bothered me more was it reminded me of the Dignitas games from 2020 spring where they didn't do anything. Where he would pick Karthus or some farming jungler, and I'm not saying it's his fault, but like they just don't seem to have a lot of playmaking on their team. Your top and your mid don't seem to be generating leads on their own that you're just going to play through. Like Fake God is usually under turret, it seems like, and Afro is pretty much the only other one. So if you have one of these games where Afro's not making plays and Dardoch is not making plays, then there's just nothing happening for this team. So I hope we don't see more of those kinds of games, but it was a not very feels good flashback to some of those 2020 games.
I mean, like I said, I always love creativity when it's used against the right opponents. But look at this game. If you are Rengar and you're playing against the Senna Tahm Kench bottom lane,
so Tahm Kench got last picked, and I think they thought Set was going to be the support because Hui has played a fair bit of Set. So but
Damonte already had played a mid-set game.
Yeah, I'm just saying. I think he didn't. It wasn't that Tahm Kench was already up there. So I agree with you. It is.
Yeah. But I'm just saying. Look at this series. You have Set rotated to mid. You have a top lane Renekton, and then like jungle Talia is going to be what he wants to try and take advantage of.
Yeah.
But if you don't, you get that early lead on her, which it made difficult by the lanes, then it's just always going to be so hard to get back into it. So that's why people are snowballing off of the early things like the Krug thing and all that type of stuff. It's hard to operate as this Rengar, right? Like when you're in the game facing this, there's Tahm Kench behind, Senna goes into the shroud, Tahm Kench is right next to him. It's like unless you catch closer face checking you without putting his W down so you don't one shot yourself jumping across rocks, that's rough.
Yeah, I mean once they did actually grab Tahm Kench, and it's Tahm Kench with exhaust. It was also fasting Senna, and it was like they did the blitz, which it seems like a few people are doing now. When you have this Tahm Kench Senna, you take the blitz, and it's supposed to answer the shields. There's also Set, so you can ult off the Set shield, the Senna shield, the gray health from Tahm Kench, and like that's the theory. It just never really worked out that well. And Tahm Kench ended up being like the only target that was kind of exposing himself a lot of the time. But because he was a farming Tahm Kench, he was actually like insanely tanky, right? Like he had the Iceborne like very early, like completed full tank mythic item, tier 2 boots, and the first ultimate that Dardoch went for, They did actually go for the Tom Kench because he was the only one who kind of exposed himself, and Afro wasn't 6 yet, so he couldn't actually ult off the Gray health. And it's like, as soon as that kill didn't result in anything and they committed so much to trying to get it, I was kind of like, oh, this game's kind of over. Yeah. Because they ended up just sitting back, and like you were saying, Mark, it felt like that Dignitas do nothing game. After that early point, all lanes lost. I mean, they were actually, their marksman was down quite a bit in farm
to the TK.
To the TK, which is rare, right? Usually it's like the Tom Kench is down 15 CS or whatever, but it's okay because the Senna is getting so many souls off you. But it was like he was up farm, so they had no pressure anywhere. And then Dardoch goes for this gank. It doesn't work. The Krugs thing adds a little bit in there because he's a little bit further behind than he would want to be. And Closer just made it one of the biggest jungle advantages I've seen in pro play. He's 5 levels up by the end of it. Hit level 18, was Flame Horizon. I actually really want to talk to Stats Team because I am curious if he set kind of experience and gold per minute records, because I can't remember a lot of games where it was like in the LCS, it was 29 minutes in and he was still over 10 CS per minute. That was insane.
And again, and that's why I pulled this replay for the analyst desk. It is afforded to him by all this early mid-wave farm that's being funneled into him when Damonte is going for these side lane plays with set diving towers and stuff. And so it's almost on the level of the old Master Yi Tarek style funnel. They're getting close to funnel. I actually want to check in. How close was he, and did he actually hit the threshold of the lower gold from lane minions for how much he got lane minions in that game? I think that might be one of the barriers that 100 Thieves come up against in some of these games. If Damonte's roaming this much and Closer's picking up farm,
make him a jungler.
I've been in solo queue games where my solo lanes are dying so much. I'm covering so many waves that you hit the minion and you're like, what? 4 gold? Ah, shit, we got the funnel penalty popping up here already.
Was it really that extreme though? I thought Damonte was like he got a couple waves when he went top, but I thought that was mainly the only time. I thought Damonte still was farming.
It happened 2 times, and the first time it happened was double stack, so he got over waves, 1 level. He got a level and a half or something from it. And when you're Talia, that slingshot boost at that early in the game means so much,
Earlier mythic or faster clear, etc. Yeah. Definitely interesting.
But he also, I don't want to take away from his play, because his play was he smashed.
Yeah, he definitely smashed. All right, on to the Honda MVP. Okay,
guess
so
what?
What?
It's Blaber.
That's true. Honda MVP section. A year after his MVP split, Blaber once again MVP candidate. How do you compare this performance to last spring? Right, that is when he won it last spring. One of you mentioned Rainover as the new coach and everything, but he absolutely ran over the league in spring last year. Is this starting to feel like that?
For sure.
So it feels a little different to me, but not in a specifically better or worse way, because it was more dominant in spring for me. It was insane, but the comps that they were playing and a lot of this stuff was
all the Olaf stuff.
Yeah, it was kind of samey, and a lot of the comps were built around propping him up. And so he was individually more dominant, but he had a lot of resources behind him. This time it feels like he's doing a lot more of it on his own. So while it's still insanely good, it's not like Perks is following him around the map and they're doing these kinds of things. In that sense, I almost think it's more impressive a little bit, but not as dominant in a way.
See, I was gonna say it was not more individually dominant in 2020 in spring. It is so much more now. His team was definitely better and more dominant in 2020 spring, but he individually right now, all of these individual outplays, it feels like he is stepping up to the plate when they have a deficit where the team, yes, they've got new players coming together and they reforged their coaching staff, and Fudge on top side is showing some of the rookie concerns that people had. Blaber is just completely hulking out. It actually feels insane. It's much more along the lines of you're getting towards your 1v9 issues. It's definitely not 1v9. Because the team is super good, but it is a bigger spotlight, I feel like, because when you're playing, to your point, when you're playing Olaf, which was a lot of 2020 spring until everyone had to start permabanning against them.
Yeah.
And you've got, Karma on your team, and you've got all of these speeds and shields and stuff. And Blaber himself is tweeting out, wow, I'm so good at farming. And he's just like talking about, oh, I'm just doing a full clear and then going to the tower that's pushed to and diving them. Like, what's the big deal here? Everybody's freaking out. Whereas now we're getting like, oh, he is individually outplaying, making other junglers look like your solo queue teammate right now in your game. I just feel like that's to me the more impressive part.
I mean, what you were talking about earlier with Demonte and Closer was kind of what they were doing in spring with Nisqy and Blaber, right? Yeah. Nisqy would roam and Blaber would soak the mid farm plus power clear plus take every dragon, and he would just get to these unstoppable levels of ahead and just run over the game, right? So I actually really like the take that he is less dominant but more impressive, which sounds really funny, right? But it's just like a function of the team, a function of the meta of how they were playing. I really like that take. I think it's a good one. Blaber definitely off to a pretty incredible start. Big Honda MVP candidate. We'll see if he can keep it up as the weeks do go on.
You sound like you're moving on already. Do we even want to mention other candidates? Because
we can if you want. Sure.
It's not in the question. It's not in the script. I won't do it.
We were just gonna do the little Blaber comparison. You got someone else you're itching to talk about there, Kobe? Go for it.
No, I just think that it does feel like it needs a little bit of round out, because there have been
round us up.
Really good.
We're feeling like
previously. I know a lot of people had Alphari in their minds. Did the getting solo killed in counter matchup by Revenge dock him enough points that, or similarly, the Core JJ one, which is always in everyone's mind, the poor start for them as well. Did that dock them enough points?
Did that dock them enough points to take them out of conversation? No. I think that they both had a bad game, but for me, unless Alphari like completely changes how he's playing, overall, and Core JJ completely changes how he's playing overall, they have been so consistently good. Alphari, I'm also really interested to kind of go back and look historically, but this is the most dominant I can remember a top laner having their laning phase be ever in the LCS. I mean, and maybe there's some stuff I'm forgetting about from like years back, but like, damn, he is consistently just crushing lanes. And yes, he did get styled on by Revenge. And, we had the interview from him where he kind of talked about, hey, like, I think I'm being a little bit too cocky with the picks at times, right? Blind picking range with Aurelia up and maybe disrespecting some of these players that like are, on the same level or a similar level. I can't remember what he said with the LEC guys. But, I think as long as he kind of like takes that to heart, I mean, if this is something he's just like doing all the time, it's just like, well, Aurelia's up, I'm going to pick Ken, and I got solo killed. Haha. If that starts happening a lot, then yeah, you start really docking points. But as long as he learns from that, this man is just crushing every single lane. It's insane.
You're both wrong. We're talking week 1. They weren't even in the same ballpark. Lock-in doesn't count. You can't take the performance from... Doesn't count for spring MVP. So right now it's not even close. The Alphari point though about how dominant he was. There was in summer 2020, Licorice was averaging through their first 9 games when they were undefeated. He was averaging plus 20 CSD, and I was like building this like whole segment about like how dominant Licorice is and like how he's doing it with like gank setup and like wave manipulation, and then they just kept losing. And it's like it was always a bigger story that week about their losing, so they never had a chance to like really, and then it just felt wrong to do in playoffs, where it's like that was like it's like 5 weeks ago, idiot. So like I never did it, but hopefully I get to do it for Alphari then if he keeps popping off.
All right, well, are we rounded out, Kobe?
We're rounded. We're real smooth eggs over here now.
Yeah, we're rounded out like the high quality wheels on the Honda cars. All right, on to the anchor questions here. We got this first anchor question here from Cooper Millhouse. What do you got for us, Cooper?
Hey, guys. A lot of times on this show and other league shows, the hosts talk about a player's potential, though they may be currently underperforming. With the exception of players like Poom, who have only been playing League for a relatively short time, how can organizations distinguish between players who are underperforming their potential and players who just aren't good enough?
I like these scouting ones because there are different ways that you can come by your judgment in your evaluation, and this is what scouts pride themselves on. Oftentimes there will be higher weight placed towards mechanical prowess, and during some amateur tournament or some internal thing, you see something like, think of like a Faker prediction play. The first time you saw a Faker just completely bamboozle someone, basically making his counter moves before the person even makes their attack. Those types of things, if you see that, and a lot of times these are 1v1 or 1v2 types of outplays, I feel like those are where a lot of I think high potential rankings for players that have not played in LCS or don't have accolades to point to. Obviously, it's very easy to point to, just last year they won the LCS. He's got this potential. I think that one's really obvious. The ones that people are searching for are those like, oh my goodness, like he has things that you can't teach. And then you try and build on the things that you can teach.
I think it's the wording of this question makes it so that it's a little ambiguous to me, because if you are excluding younger players or players who are just beginning to have relatively short experience, like Revenge is someone who's like, oh my god, he's dominated solo queue for so long, he's been playing competitive for like I think 2 years now, technically, maybe
this
just
is
one.
his
I
second
forget.
year.
Yes, this is his second. So like obviously he's going to be someone where you're like, I don't think he's reached his ceiling because he hasn't been really given that opportunity. For the players who have been around a little while and then are struggling, like Kobe was kind of saying about like, oh, well, what was their most recent peak? How long ago was it? How high was it? And then what are the extenuating circumstances? I think for me would be like the big question. Like, is your team environment crap? Has there something going on behind the scenes? Is there a reason that you can give me for why this is this way? It is a big part of it for why I
as opposed to like their new cap.
Yeah, like, are you just not that great anymore? I think it is a different question.
Yeah.
Like, because a lot of players have gone on slides and people still sign them like they're at that peak. And I don't think that there was necessarily a good reason you could give me for that slide. And the ones that people like to usually try and give is like, oh, well, their team wasn't as good. And it's like, bro, you're on that team. You are part of that team. If the team's not, if your teammates aren't that good, like, okay, like, but that only gets you so far for me. And I feel like that's an excuse I hear so often for players who are seeming to be exiting the peak of their career is, well, their teammates aren't that great. And it's like, well, you're part of that team. That's not really
You're one of the teammates.
Yeah, you're one of those teammates.
You're one of the teammates that aren't that great.
Yeah. So like versus like, oh my god, like this player has huge attitude issues, and like you're juggling that kind of stuff. Like when Immortals skyrocketed from 7th to 1st, that split when they brought in Smithy, excuse me, and like you saw the influence. I think like those are situations where it's a little bit more obvious.
The only thing I would add, I agree with what you guys have brought up, especially the mechanics and everything. I would say, aptitude for learning, like how quickly people can improve. And that's something that we don't really get to see as much. But that's something you'll hear coaches reference, right? When you're working with a player, like how well they're able to actually take on your lessons and improve on things week over week. If you identify mistakes or areas in which they need to improve, and you can see them making those improvements, throughout the split, even if they're not to where you want them to be yet, you consistently see them making those strides, you're going to feel like, hey, this is something that, is workable. This is something where they still can have that upward trajectory with the right coaching, with the right support. This player can get where I want them to be. And if a player is constantly repeating mistakes, that's something that I think is sometimes going to make people feel like, hey, maybe they actually just can't do it. Maybe they can't, actually reach the level that we want them to get to. Thank you very much for that question. Cooper, we got a question here, a Twitter question from Cam Edgecomb. This one says, what champions do you wish scaled with AP instead of AD or vice versa? My pick would be Mordekaiser because Gore Drinker would be really strong on him.
I know my pick.
Let's
go.
hear it.
You guys thinking? I want Quinn to be AP because then she would have like an AP ratio on her speed and she'd be even faster, and you'd just be the sonic missile. Your auto attack's gonna do anything, so you just have to sonic missile in there, blow somebody up, and then like either vault flash away or like have some sort of Zonias. You just sonic missile in Zonias, hope the team comes in and saves you out of it. I want to see AP Quinn.
Mm-hmm.
What you got?
I actually got distracted, debating in my head if I agree with Mordekaiser. I just started wanting to tell the Twitter question, like, you're wrong. He needs like a proto belt and stuff. So I needed a little bit more time to think instead of just arguing with this person in my head.
This is hard.
Yeah,
I don't really have anything immediately coming to mind, to be honest with you.
All right, I'll just show you guys more of the Quinn gameplay. It's like this.
AP Pike.
AD. There's actually no reason.
Okay, the ult already pisses me off. If the ult like scales crazy with AP and he's just jumping around, pentakills everybody, I could see it.
I don't feel like I have a good answer. It's kind of a weird question because it's like there's, you can make things scale with another like AD or AP, but it doesn't necessarily, if it doesn't change the way that they actually play, then like does it actually matter, right? Like does it
Pike you.
Well, that's why I think an auto attack based champion, like something that you normally do use autos for, that's one of the big changes. And usually if it scales with AP, then you get really big ability hits. That's kind of why I chose Quinn.
It's like Tristana, right? Like Tristana, AP Tristana, I think was kind of fun back in the day. It was
Deathfire
kind of a
Grasp
degenerate play style where, DFG, you just jump on their head and ultimate one-shot them. I think stuff like that's pretty fun.
I think part of the reason it's hard too is there's some classes where like changing them to AD like corrects how they would ever function. Like you can't really make mages AD in any reasonable way right now with itemization. Where like AD items either help with bruisers or they help with kind of marksmen, and there's not really a way that like, and like assassins are a shared pool where like I think there's AP and AD assassins, but like things like marksman becoming AP is weird and stuff. So
yeah, exactly. Like making LeBlanc AD. I mean, unless the like AD is just like boosting your spells for some like inexplicable reason, because there are some things.
I've
like
played
that,
with
right?
a decent amount of AD LeBlancs, by the way.
Yeah. I mean, people were doing it for a bit. I think it's kind of troll, but it's like Tryndamere, right? Like how you can have AP scaling your E, but it deals physical damage, right? So it's like if you're talking about weird stuff like that, then it's almost like feels like it's breaking the rules, right? It's like
I like when both are viable. I like when rules are broken, but
APE never forget.
Okay, then I want Ahri to scale with AD, but I want AD to also boost her spells, so she's the same as she is as AP. She just builds different items. There you go.
Yeah, see, you don't get both. You gotta have different strengths.
And then you bring back.
It's funny
Gunblade,
because you use two examples, LeBlanc and Ahri, which are two like borderline troll examples that people have built
AD last year people were doing a bit
at a decent level.
How about Senna? Senna just like more of a pure AP scaling, I think could be kind of interesting, more spell based, right? If the W actually did a lot of damage, if the E was like ramping up with speed from your AP, and just more spell based, because generally speaking you are much more about the actual auto attacks, right? So that could be kind of interesting. You just have like a mega shield with your ultimate and super big move speed with your E. So that could be kind of a fun one. Interesting question. Thank you very much for that. But I think that's about gonna do it for this week episode of The Dive. Thank you, Honda, for making this episode possible. Remember, you can check us out Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Anchor FM. Sub to the new YouTube channel, youtube.com/LCS. All the LCS content you love is going to be up there. Funny videos, different stuff like this or that with Toby. You got The Dive, all kinds of good stuff. And you can send us your questions on Twitter, #TheDiveLOL. You can tweet them to us. Also, keep sending us your voice messages on anchor.fm. And we appreciate everyone who has been doing the Apple Podcast reviews. I said last week we were going to look at them this week, but I completely forgot and we didn't look at all. So next week, maybe we'll look at them.